So I think you start, I mean, besides the fact that Adrian's the most interesting new wrinkle to this team this year, I think you always start with the quarterback. Andrew Kramer and I always did that when we were running the Purple Podcast. I don't know how you guys are doing the Purple Podcast now.
You're back, by the way.
As we get back
Starting
into
next
the season,
Wednesday, you're back.
Twice weekly episodes of the Purple Podcast, so anybody who's been missing their Wetmore fix on that podcast, if there were anybody.
So your parents, in case your parents haven't
Mom,
listened.
Dad, I'll be back on the Purple Podcast. Right. We're going to be doing twice weekly episodes, but we'd always start with the quarterback. That was the number one rule of the NFL, revolves around the quarterback. And so we have to start with Teddy Bridgewater on this episode, in my opinion. The over-under that I got was an interesting one, because sometimes you might think passing yards, you might think touchdowns.
Boring.
Points.
Those are boring, yep.
Totally boring. So Phil, being Mr. Analytical, picked a totally arbitrary ESPN-created quarterback stat.
But it's less arbitrary than other arbitrary quarterback statistics.
Widely accepted now, but still flawed, as I think we'd all acknowledge. A fun stat, though, to dig around in. And it does a pretty good job of, if you were ranking a list of the quarterbacks who had the best season last year, this stat would pretty much agree with them, and that's QBR. You'd pretty much have the same list that, yep, this guy, these are my top 10. Teddy Bridgewater, though, not a top 10 quarterback last year, obviously a strong finish to the season.
I think he was somewhere between 20 and 25 in QBR. And I'm sure most people have heard of QBR before, but for people who don't really know what it means, QBR is quarterback rating on a scale of 1 to 100, with 50 being average, with a mindfulness of context. So
right.
And by context, I mean, let's say Teddy Bridgewater completes a 15-yard pass on 3rd and 17. Well, he shouldn't just get credit for a 15-yard pass. I mean, the defense did its job.
Correct.
They held the offense off the field or got him out the field on 3rd and 17. So if you're completing 9-yard passes on 3rd and 7, you get more credit than if you're completing 15-yard passes on 3rd and 20.
Right.
So that's what QBR accounts for.
Well, and conversely, too, you'd look at if you don't pick up that, say it's 3rd and 3 and you complete a 2-yard pass. Well, okay, that's not quite as valuable if you're at the 2-yard line and you complete a 2-yard pass, which was actually in the back of the end zone, so it was more like a 12-yard pass, but it doesn't matter with normal statistics. Right. QBR tries to weight those things and give context.
QBR is a product that ESPN decided about 5 years ago, rightfully so, that passer rating makes no sense.
Sure.
If you've ever gone through how to come up with passer rating, it's the damnedest thing, and I think a perfect passer rating is 158.3.
Well, didn't Mitch Leitner, now the college one's different, but didn't Mitch Leitner have a better passer rating than Boykin after the TCU Gophers game?
But the college,
which is ridiculous.
The college passer rating can actually exceed 200, and so both quarterbacks sort of sucked there that night.
Yeah.
But I think 158.3 is the perfect passer rating in the National Football League, and they decided this makes zero sense. So QBR, and didn't, I want to say Bridgewater was... his last 4 games of last season, his QBR shot way up.
Yeah, it did.
And
so
rightfully so,
key
too.
for him.
He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league the final 4 weeks of the season. So that would totally make sense that his QBR would get jacked up in that quarter of the season. But I like what you did here. You didn't pick a QBR because I personally wouldn't be able to guess on the nuts what he's going to be this season. But you said that his QBR will be 13th or greater. And this is the only one that I'm not going to change. I'm not going to do a half.
Okay.
Because if he's 13, we'll take the wash and just say, okay, you guys were all, that was a great number, Phil, right on the money.
So the question is sort of, I'll throw it out to you guys first, and then I'll answer last. Is he a borderline top 10 quarterback in 2015 according to QBR? So is he over under 13th in QBR at the end of the season?
And I'm going to say no.
I
say he's lower than 13th on the QBR. You're going to take all the quarterbacks, line them up from 1 to 30, whatever, however many quarterbacks you're going to have. Bridgewater is going to be 14 or lower on that list in terms of QBR at the end of the season.
I'm going to give you an exact. He'll be 16th. He's a middle of the pack, second-year
Well,
quarterback.
he already knows. All right, guys.
He's a middle of the pack.
I'm going to go get beers.
And by the way, I am going to very soon. But he is a middle. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for a second-year quarterback, for him to move above 13 for an entire season would be fantastic. I think when you have an offense, and this all is once again goes back to the health of the offensive line. But if the Vikings have their health, that offensive line performs to a decent standpoint. Peterson's effective. Bridgewater's effective, but he's not great. And so I predict that he will be a middle of the pack. In a 32-team league, I think he's right in the middle, with room to move up in the future, but right now he's about 16th.
And I saw one of the reasons that I picked that, and I don't necessarily think that Bridgewater's not the answer quarterback. I think he could be a perfectly fine quarterback on a winning team. But there are quarterbacks who I trust more to be established this year. I think we can get very easily caught up in the final quarter of the season and say, okay, that's who he is, and he's on this upward trajectory, and no looking back. The sky's the limit. He's only going to go up and up and up and up. We tend to forget about sometimes quarterbacks regress. They take a step backwards in their second season. Happens all the time. And Andrew Luck, correct me if I'm mistaken, but and looking up their QBRs from last season, Andrew Luck finished with a worse QBR than Teddy Bridgewater. I don't foresee the Indianapolis Colts offense, which will revolve around Luck once again. I don't necessarily see them sticking in that mid-pack. I think there are too many guys that were behind him to trust that he's not going to get passed up in the left lane by a couple of guys.
And don't forget, too, we are making these predictions at a really bad time. We are in the eye of the preseason storm, which is we've had training camp started in late July, and almost everything is positive. And so
Teddy was amazing in preseason,
and you
so
get
it's
caught
easy
up,
to get.
Yeah, and Peterson looks fantastic, but there's so many unknown variables that we have not examined. And think about all the stories we've read and the talk that's been positive. It doesn't mean that the Vikings won't be good, but right now it's really easy to get caught up in that windstorm of, oh man, it's great.
If things break good, this could happen.
When things aren't bad, but you just don't know which way they'll go.
I'm going to go bold here and say 12th.
Okay.
I'm going to say
Still taking the over.
Over on the 13 as the number. Okay. So he's not going to, but automatically Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning probably still, even if
Tony Romo.
But there's the group of like Tony Romo, Ryan Tannehill. There's about 6 or 7 quarterbacks that could go anywhere between 7th and 15th.
Yep, Tannehill was below Bridgewater last year too. That was one of the guys that I looked at and I said, how are Luck and Tannehill not going to finish the season with a better QBR?
And so a lot of it is sort of circumstantial too. Is your offensive line playing well? Because your play as a quarterback can be influenced by a sieve for a left tackle or so, and that's the question with the Vikings. So, so I guess I'm going to be a little more optimistic and say not quite top 10, but over 13.
I want to move to the most intriguing member of the offense before we get to some of the ones that are actually kind of a little bit more fun for fake betting purposes in terms of monopoly money and beers and gentlemen's agreements and whatnot, whatever we're wagering on these. We have to get to Peterson first. You mentioned it off the top. 1,400 yards was the line you set, and I'm not even going to put a half. Because if he finishes at exactly 1,400, then fine. We'll just take the wash. That, That's good. Hey, great number. You picked it right on. Personally, for me, I spent the most time thinking about this one. This is the hardest one for me because there's so much to wait. And how long have we been thinking about this, right? I mean, this is a year in the making, basically.
Yeah, it's been a year.
And so there's a lot of things that you can sort of vacillate, go back and forth over what you think that Peterson's going to contribute this season. But I think even if he's a positive contributor, and I think even if he's better than maybe many are expecting him to be, 1,400 yards has only been accomplished twice in his career. Now, once, of course, was the near historic season.
Yep.
But to consider how great he's been since 2007 and to say that he's only rushed for 1,400 yards in 2 of those full seasons, at the end it was pretty easy for me to say, okay, even if things break well and things go his way, I can't take the over on 1,400 yards. I got to take the under on this number.
So I'm also taking the under on 1,400, but I might take the over on 1,300. I think it's somewhere around 1,300, and the reason why I'm not going to go completely overboard is because unlike when he ran for 2,000, and it was 2012, if I think back right, 3 years ago.
Because it was after the surgery, right?
They needed him to run the ball for 2,000 yards to eke into the playoffs because Christian Ponder was so mediocre. Even on a good day, he was mediocre. Bridgewater, I think on a bad day, is right along the same line as Ponder on a pretty good day.
Okay.
I think Bridgewater is such a step or two above Christian Ponder at this age in their careers that if Peterson runs for 2,000 yards or runs for well over 1,400 yards, it'll be a red flag for the offense because you don't want him carrying the ball that often. You don't want him running roughshod for 100-plus yards a game unless it's within the context of a good passing game, too. Sure. Now, if he runs for 1,400 and the passing game is really good, then they're one of the best offenses in the NFL, and I'm not quite ready to say that yet either. So I will say they substitute some runs for some short passes, which is what Norv Turner has done in the past with other running backs, LaDainian Tomlinson, too.
I'd almost rather pick total yards for Peterson because I think you're right. I think they're going to take some of that burden off of him. But
we could almost say 1,800 or 1,900 total yards over under which would give him 13 or 14 in the
Right.
passing game and 400 or 500, or vice versa.
Yeah.
What do you think, Judd?
I'm going to box this, actually. I'm going to go the under on rushing yards, but his career high in receptions is 43 in 2009 with Favre, and the over on 43.
We have an exacta box
Yes,
here
because-
on the I
because
almost
Phil's
said
right.
Touch Them All podcast. I get them all blended together.
Because
They're
Phil's
all
right.
really
Again, it's
good.
talking.
But Phil's right. If he goes, and I have said this for a while now, if he goes crazy rushing yards, something's gone wrong, which means Bridgewater is either not accomplishing what he needs to. The passing game is not working. Guys are getting hurt, and so you're giving the ball to Peterson out of desperation. So I think he goes under on the rushing yardage total, which is fine. But I think he has, I'm going to put him on 48 to 50 receptions, which for him would be outstanding.
Be a career high.
So I'd box that.
Yeah, okay.
Because I do believe he's going to be a focal point of the offense. I, however, believe that if everything goes right by week 8, the star of this offense is Teddy Bridgewater.
This is all with an asterisk of if he plays 16 games.
And that's
too,
the other
which,
question.
You know, he has shown even when he's been
So 3
relatively
times?
healthy going into seasons, he'll miss a game or two with an ailment, or he'll tear up the knee.
Right, or even if
obviously.
he's playing towards the end of the season,
But
he
I
was
looked
kind
it
of
up.
broken down. You know,
I looked it
it's
up.
happened in the past.
I want to say he has played 16 games in a season 3 times in his entire career.
double-check that.
It's ordinarily 14 or 12 or something like that. So, yeah,
And
if he plays 16 games, that's what this is predicated on.
I'd be curious to know too how many carries he's going to get. Like we don't know that. Maybe they have a good idea. Norv in his head thinks, okay, if things break perfectly for us, here's how we'll use Peterson throughout the course of a season. But even his preseason prediction is, subject to variables changing that he wasn't expecting. That maybe in week 6, the offensive line is really, really struggling, and okay, you got to go throw more pass pro sets.
Do you think Norv has carries in mind for Peterson or touches? I would guess it's touches. I mean, if you look at the way that Norv likes to use his backs, I bet you they've got a pitch count or a goal, but I bet you it's touches, not carries.
Either way, don't you think that could change? Say
Sure.
week 6 comes, and like I said, maybe the offensive line loses another member. Suddenly, you've got to throw more 2 tight end sets for blocking. You got to throw a running back in that you're comfortable in pass protection. And unless Adrian takes a significant step forward, I'm not sure that's him all the time. He can probably do that some of the times because you still want him in there in passing downs. But I don't see him as being the perfect 3-down back kind of a player, even though he might be still the best runner in the NFL. I don't know. I'm not confident that Norv Turner would see him as the best overall back, and so that kind of goes to your point.
And here's another factor too. Could we see the Vikings just riding him into the ground, knowing that? Because what's the guaranteed money for 2016? I mean,
Yeah.
can't they cut him before
Yes,
March?
it's a 1-year. He basically got a reworked one-year
Right.
contract that's masked as a multi.
And I honestly think the Vikings would like to have him in play for 2016 too, because it helps your offense. If he's really good
Sure.
in 2015, you're going to want him back in 2016. So my theory almost doesn't really add up. Is if they ride him into the ground in 2015 and he carries the ball 350 times for 1,700 yards or something, well, then they're going to want him back. They're not going to cut him then before
Yeah.
2016.
Sure. Well, and that's if you can tell me he's going to get 350 carries, then I'll be more comfortable taking the over on 1,400. But I'm not confident in his role or his usage.
The one thing to keep in mind is I think you can push him and make him an option in the passing game if he is the receiver. The one thing I'm pretty certain of, though, is you're going to have to be very careful if you're going to use him on 3rd down in pass protection, because he's never been good there.
Right.
And I don't think that you can make him good there. So the one thing that I think Norv is going to find is I can use him more as a receiver possibly than he was under Bevel or Musgrave. But if I push him too much on 3rd down, I don't want to get Teddy Bridgewater killed.
Right.